Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 18th of October of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And we're going to start our trip from Kherson area, and to be more precise, from the cities by the name of Pishane and Poima. According to the information we have during the previous night and the day on the 17th and 18th of October, the Ukrainians managed to concentrate significant number of forces on the Russian side of the Dnieper river, somewhere in this area, and after they complete the concentration, the Ukrainians launched an offensive operation. Mainly the Ukrainians were moving along the railway tracks, and as a result of that attack, unexpected attack, the Ukrainians managed to enter the city by the name of the village, by the name of Pishchanovka, and the Russian sources published the video of that of the movement of Ukrainian forces inside the city. On this video we can see at least two Ukrainian soldiers who were moving from one building to another, and the author of this video claims that on this video we can see the Ukrainian soldiers. So that was the result of attack. Furthermore, the Russian sources are saying that through those villages, two civilian cars were moving from one point to another, and the Ukrainian reconnaissance team, sabotage team, destroyed the cars, including the passengers inside of cars. So basically, by the end of 17th of October, the Ukrainians managed to establish a small foothold in this area. Furthermore, some sources are saying that the Ukrainians even managed to establish control over the village by the name of Poima. The Russians, when they got that information, concentrated their forces and launched a series of counteroffensive operations. First, they attacked Poima, and after that, the Russians launched counteroffensive operation in direction of Pishchanovka, to be more precise, on direction of these edge Ukraine positions. As a result of those two counteroffensives, and as a result of artillery strikes, the entire Ukrainian foothold was destroyed. Two footholds were destroyed, and the Ukrainians were forced to step back the same way along the railway tracks in direction of, let's say, the Pridniprovska, so in direction of this area. The Ukrainians had their main crossing positions, pontoon positions, in the vicinity of this destroyed railway bridge. The Russians discovered the main Ukrainian logistic area and started bombing and shelling this territory heavily, using all types of weapons they have. The Russians were using TOS flamethrower systems. The Russians were using guided bombs. Some sources are saying that the Russians even were using Iskander. As a result of those strikes, the Ukrainians lost their positions in this area. They tried to dig in deeper, but probably they weren't prepared for that, such a pressure, such attacks. And as a result of those clashes, the Ukrainians lost significant number of soldiers in the vicinity of that bridge. We have some photos and videos of dead Ukrainian bodies. We're not going to watch them because of casualties and lots of dead people and dead soldiers from Ukrainian side. So some Ukrainian forces returned back in direction of Pridniprovska. Some of the Ukrainian forces returned back to this bank of the river. Some sources evacuated using the boats, and as you can see, there is a river by the name of Tsyrypinskaya Konka, and using this river, the Ukrainians were moving their soldiers from one position to another. The Russians, when everything happened, the Russians increased the control over this territory, and as a result of another FPV drone strike, another Ukrainian boat was destroyed along the Tsyrypinskaya Konka. Probably there were more boats, but at least one of the boats were destroyed, and we have geolocation of that. Furthermore, another boat was destroyed between the Ukrainian and Russian banks of the river. The same situation. The Ukrainians, as we can see, the Ukrainians have significant number of light boats that they use for all these operations, and another boat was destroyed as a result of Russian probably artillery fire or maybe another FPV drone strike. Currently, the Ukrainians save their presence in this area, and basically they have Tsyrypinskaya Konka. This river is something like a natural barrier that allowed the Ukrainians to feel them pretty safe on the northern part of this river, and they can continue concentration forces. So first, reconnaissance and force that took place on the 17th and 18th of October gave the Ukrainians some results, but they haven't managed to dig in deeper and to create a powerful foothold. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of counter-offensive operation, the result of clashes and bombings and artillery strikes in this area, the Ukrainians lost up to 70 soldiers, 2 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. So as you can see, the Ukrainians paid a very big price for that crazy operation. Now we are moving further to the Zaporozhye area, to the Bradley Square. Currently there are very heavy clashes on the fields between Verbova and Rabotina, right on the edge position of Verbova. The Ukrainians, as a result of counter-offensive operation that took place also on the 17th of October, managed to return control over the positions that the Russians recaptured a few days ago. And the Ukrainians published geolocated video of movements along the trenches with Ukrainian forces. So as a result of that attack, they managed to restore control, and furthermore the Ukrainians managed to concentrate some forces on the western part of Verbova. And after the concentration, the Ukrainians launched an offensive operation on the western part of Verbova. Furthermore, the Ukrainians were using not just armored vehicles and infantry. The Ukrainians were using FPV drones. Using FPV drones, the Ukrainians tried to control the city, the village, and there were lots of explosions, lots of droppings with bombs. And as a result of those droppings or those bombardments, the Russians had some damage in infantry, some losses in infantry, some damage among the armored vehicles and so on, but yet the Ukrainians haven't managed to enter the village. The Russians managed to repel every single attack and to force the Ukrainians to step back. After the clashes ended, the Ukrainians ran some kind of evacuation stuff. On this video we can see how the Ukrainians were trying to evacuate another damaged Ukrainian armored vehicle, but as a result of anti-tank missile strike, the evacuation machine was destroyed. So currently there are two damaged machines that needed to be evacuated. Furthermore, as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians had a lot of losses, and during the evacuation procedures, the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainians with FPV drones bombing, which also increased the level of losses among the Ukrainians on this direction. So, as we discussed in the previous videos, you can enter Rabotina Verbova fields, but probably you don't have chances to evacuate and to escape this territory. Everything that enters Verbova stays in Verbova. We can call it like this, or every leave the hope, every who enter. So this is the situation in this area. Furthermore, the Ukrainians made another attack in direction of Verbova. Currently, the Ukrainians need to start fighting for the Verbova probably since from the beginning, because according even to the Western sources, the Ukrainians don't have 100% control over this territory. There are very heavy clashes, and mainly the Russians are bombing this territory with all types of weapons they have. And as a result of another bombing, the Ukrainians lost another armored vehicle somewhere in the central part of the city. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 85 soldiers, 4 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system. Now we are moving further to the city by the name of Berdyansk. Today we got more details about the results of Ukrainian attack missile strike, and according to geolocated videos we have, and differences between the same area of 15th and 17th of October, we can make a conclusion that up to 4 or 5 helicopters were damaged / destroyed in this area. Not so many, but anyway, this is a very hard damage for the Russians. But this is not the situation, not the strike, not the damage that can change the entire situation on the front lines. Now we are moving further to the south, Donetsk direction, and we got a lot of very interesting updates from the area in the vicinity of Konstantinovka, Novomikhailivka. The Russians continue their offensive operation in Novomikhailivka to attack Novomikhailivka, to storm the area. The Russians are implemented a lot of special operations. For example, using FPV drone, the Russians attacked and destroyed another Ukrainian communication positions in the coal mines in the vicinity of Vadiana. There are a lot of interesting things that we can see on this video. First of all, the Russians have possibilities to fly very deep inside of Ukrainian positions. As you can see, as a result of strike, another equipment was destroyed, and probably for some period of time the Ukrainians, the quality of their connections was reduced. Furthermore, the Russians, to reduce the Ukrainian logistic possibilities and to, let's say, and to tighten the news in the vicinity of Novomikhailivka, destroyed the bridge that connected Konstantinovka with Marinka as a result of artillery strike. As you can see, according to this video, we can say that the bridge left the chat as a result of that strike, and of course it will reduce the Ukrainian possibilities in their logistic. And basically, if they want to support Novomikhailivka, now they need to use not very safe road from Победа, let's say Konstantinovka, Paraskovyevka, and then Novomikhailivka, of course, which will increase the level of loss of the Ukrainian forces. Furthermore, they lost some connections between, let's say, northern positions in Konstantinovka. This is not a long-term achievement from the Russian side. Obviously, in a week or in two, the Ukrainians will solve the issue and will find a solution how to connect the splitted parts. But anyway, it will give some benefits for the Russians for a very short period of time, probably to make another attempt to attack the Ukrainian positions in Novomikhailivka. And for example, today the Russians have already launched another wave of artillery preparation, and they were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions along this tree line using a toss flamethrower system. So this is possibly the artillery preparation or toss flamethrower preparation before the next wave of attack. The Russians during the previous waves of attacks managed to maintain the gray zone and to get as close as possible to the Ukrainian positions. Now they need just to make a very short rush between fields and to start clashes for the tree lines. And after that, the Russians will be able to move along the tree lines from the south to the north. On this video, we can see how the Russians using toss flamethrower systems were bombing the edge Ukrainian positions. This video is geolocated, which also confirms the edge Ukrainian positions and the edge Russian positions. So now the Russians, after the end of artillery preparation, can attack this area and start clearing this territory, and they will be able to start movements along the tree lines, and using this tactic they can get Novomikhailivka from the south. We haven't received nothing from the northern direction. I expect that in a day or two we're going to receive some pictures which will give us a better understanding of the current situation in the northern part of Novomikhailivka. I'll remind you that the latest update we had is that the Russians were trying to maintain this territory and to capture this foothold on the northern part of Novomikhailivka to get closer to the village itself. Now we are moving to Avdiivka area, and we got also a lot of very interesting updates from this territory. The most important updates are coming from the southern part of Avdiivka. The Russians continue their offensive operation. They continue storming the trenches and the fortifications of the Ukrainians on this side. Today we got a lot of geolocations that confirms that the Russians managed to that the Russian words that they managed to maintain and to capture new territories and checkpoints on the south as a result of Avdiivka news operation was correct. There was no lie. Everything was geolocated, and the information was published both by the Ukrainian and the Russian side. On this video we can see the safe rotation process. The Russians, one Russian group changed another group on the edge positions. After that, the fresh Russian forces moved along the trenches, these trenches. So the Russians made rotation in this area, so they landed on these trenches. Then the Russians were moving along the trenches line to the west north, and after that the Russians started storming these positions, and as a result of a storm operation, the Russians managed to clear this checkpoint and to establish control over this stronghold. So this territory is currently under the Russians, and now they will of course dig in deeper. They need to repel the Ukrainian attacks, and after that, after the Russians are able to repel the Ukrainian attacks, of course they will continue their offensive operation further. So the main plan and the main goal of the Russians on this area is of course to develop their positions, but the stronghold the Russians are planning to attack in strategical perspective, not like operational success, is to establish control over this fortification area. This is a hotel, ex-hotel. There was a hotel when there was no war in Ukraine before 2014, and this area has the name of Tsarskaya Khota, the hotel or some camp, some camping, Tsarskaya Khota, and this is a very well fortified area with a lot of Ukrainians inside. This is something like the first main position, strategical positions, and the main purpose of the Russians is to attack this territory at least from three directions. The first one along the road, along this street that the Russians have already got very close. The second direction is from the southwest, and of course the third direction is going to be from the southeast. So this is the Russian plan. Of course, I'm not saying that the Russians are going to do this tomorrow. Obviously they still need to do a lot of job. Probably up to once or 2 months, or probably up to months they need to establish control over these territories, and after that they will be able to start storming the city, this small camp Tsarskaya Khota. Furthermore, during the day the Ukrainians were trying to support their forces, but the Russians controlled the entire situation, and as a result of FPV drone strike, the Russians managed to destroy another group of Ukrainian forces in the... So the Russians are getting very close to the city, We see the FPV drone. He is heading right exactly in this forest below the Starskaya Nakhota, and now we are going to see the results of strike. That was something like a clearing operation in this area, so the Russians are ready to continue their offensive operation. When talking about the northern direction, we got some video from the Ukrainian sources about another attempt of the Russian forces to strike. The Russians had a lot of problems on the north, probably on Krasnogorovka. This is the repeat of Ugledar story and many other front lines in this area. The Ukrainian sources have already calculated the number of losses that the Russians had in the vicinity of Krasnogorovka, and the numbers varies from 40 till 140 units just for the battle for 6 days. Of course, the level of losses are very heavy. Now we are moving further to Klishchiivka area. We got some update from this territory as well, but the most important is that the front line in this area was completely stabilized. Neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians are attacking in this area. There are no chances to achieve success for both sides. Everybody, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, have a very deep defense state. Nobody is going to risk, and because the Ukrainians waste a lot of blood to capture the bridgehead on the right side of the railways. When talking about Kupiansk-Liman front line, there are lots of updates from this territory. Before we go, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes for Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 15 soldiers. So as you can see, the level of losses was very low. So that means that the clashes, the intensifying of actions were reduced to minimal level for some regrouping or making some plans and creating some plans for further offensive operation. When talking about Kupiansk-Liman front line, the Russians reported that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost up to 60 soldiers. So the level of losses is normal, like in the middle level in comparison with the previous days. During the day, the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in the Kremenaya forest, trying to get their positions to destroy ammo depots, but as I understand it, there were no active clashes on the ground. And the same situation along Zhiribets river. The Russians were bombing the village by the name of Terny. As a result of artillery strike, the Russians managed to destroy another supply vehicle in this area. Probably there are very heavy clashes in front of Makiivka, but we haven't received any updates about the results of those strikes. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in Kupiansk direction. In the city by the name of Pershatravneva, the Russians managed to discover the positions of Ukrainian forces, their ammo depots, and as a result of 500 strike, 2 ammo depots were destroyed. According to the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, the level of losses of the Ukrainian forces on this direction was around 80 soldiers and 9 armored vehicles. As you can see, the level of losses is very heavy. When talking about armored vehicles and the personnel, 80 soldiers, it's an unusual level of losses. It's not the heaviest and the biggest, but it's unusual level of losses for this direction. When talking about the northern Kupiansk direction, the Russians started the ground storming operation of Sinkovka and Petropavlovka. I'm not sure that the Russians' main plans of this phase of attack is to capture the cities, but at least to get more strongholds and shelters in the vicinity. The Russians were bombing Sinkovka heavily. That was something like artillery preparation, and as a result of another artillery strike, the Ukrainians lost their positions in ammo depot on the edge of the city. Furthermore, the Russians were bombing the entire city from the north to the south, from the east to the west. So the Russians, as you can see, are very close to the city, and there is no barriers. There are no more barriers between the Russians and the Ukrainians, maybe just the minefields when talking about Sinkovka. The same situation took place in Petropavlovka. The Russians are bombing the city heavily, trying to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities, logistic possibilities, their warehouses and so on. The Russians are trying to repeat the same story as we saw in Novomykhailovka, but even though Novomykhailovka was almost reduced to ruins, currently the Russians still don't have possibilities to establish full control over the city. And another artillery system was destroyed behind on the Ukrainian side of Oskol River. The Russians drone discovered the Ukrainian hidden position, and as a result of Krasnopol hit, another Ukrainian artillery system was destroyed. So for now we don't see any changes on the ground, but probably they are, because the Minister of Defense reports every single day about some progress, about more trenches that were captured during the previous 24 hours. So let's wait and let's see, but anyway, the situation is not going to come down during the autumn period period phase of special military operation. Either the Russians and the Ukrainians are planning to attack, and as we discussed, probably this year one of the sides is going to get tactical defeat, and we're going to see the process of the beginning of the fall either of the Russians or the Ukrainians. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.